Hi everyone, my name is Maria and I'm the Green Stitcher here on Flosstube and over on Instagram. I didn't expect to see you so soon and to be filming this video today. However, prepping sort of for the end of the month video, which will be next week, what I've stitched in March, a bit of sewing that I've done, some purchases that I've made as well. I've realized the next one is probably going to be a bigger video, and I've had a few questions on my previous videos left in the comments or a few messages on Instagram where some of you have asked some questions about the way I stitch, and I thought instead of sort of adding it to the end of the monthly video in March, I will just make a quick little video here and hopefully that will answer your questions. It's probably mostly going to be for beginners. However, I imagine some of the ways I stitch might not be very traditional or very widespread in the English-speaking stitching community, so you might find something useful. I'm not sure. If you have any questions still after this one, please feel free to comment or message me on Instagram. Like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions I can, and let's get right to it. So I'm going to speak about a few things today, and I'll try and put the timeline so you can skip through things if you don't want to see something or if you want to get to a particular topic straight away. So I had a few questions and I'm going to talk to you about electronic patterns, my app that I use and the way I get electronic patterns. I had that question. I'm going to talk to you about the bead organizer I use to bead, not the organization of beads that I showed you last week, where they sit in my boxes there in little glass jars, like an actual organizer. And I'm going to talk a lot about scroll frames. So I had a lot of questions to do with how they work, how to put your fabric on it, why I'm using them over sort of other methods of putting your fabric on and stretching it. So here are the topics I'll be covering today. Right, let's get to it then. And first and foremost, I'll be answering all the questions to do with scroll frames. I had quite a few of them, like I said, over on Instagram and in the comments to my previous videos. So I'm going to show you my actual setup. I'm not going to be stitching on camera. I think that's quite universal, but I'll talk about some of the other things to do with scroll frames. So like I said in some of my videos, I use this wooden stand that has legs made of wood connected with screws, and then you can set up the height that you want. It's quite easily if you don't tighten these bolts all the way, so you can make it taller if you say stitching on the sofa and it's sat on the sofa next to your thighs, or you can make it a bit lower if you're stitching on or near your desk like I do, and so you can adjust that quite easily, which I love. At the moment, I use slightly different scroll frames than I used to use before. So let me show you one of those quickly. So as an example, and this is probably one of the ones you can get the easiest in UK. These are the LBC, I hope that's the right way to pronounce it, scroll frames with clips. So the reason I used to love these is it was nice and easy and quite quick to put your fabric in. So you buy the frame, you assemble it, and then there's a groove. As you can see, there's a groove here in the wood. They come with the clips, and then you just clip your fabric in and it tightens it and holds it in place. And then you do the same on the other side and you have your stretched fabric, which is quite easy and simple. And then the mechanism that these scroll frames tighten the hold is, let me show you sideways probably. Yep, is they have this cut out on the side, and the more you screw in this bolt, the tighter this gets and the tighter it holds the rod, and you adjust it to the position and the stretch that you need, and then this holds it in place. These are probably one of the most common used in UK, at least from what I gathered. I used to buy them because they were quite easy to get in UK for me, and they didn't cost too much, and then they have quite a variety of sizes, and The only thing that I might have had to do, I don't remember if it comes like that on its own. I had to drill, well, I asked my partner to help me out with this. So I had to drill this hole in the middle so I can put it on my stitchy frame. So this is one of the mechanisms you can use for the scroll frame. So probably going back just a second, the reason I use this particular scroll frame, this particular stand, is unfortunately I cannot stitch in one hand much. So I do my stitching with my right hand. I'm a right hand person. I use my mouse at work a lot with my right hand as well. I'm also a PC gamer, which means I use my mouse a lot for gaming, which all ended up straining my wrist. And I, sometime during COVID, when I was off work for some time and I was stitching my heart away, I had sharp pains in my wrist and sort of soreness. And I wanted to get better and find a way to stitch that doesn't strain my wrist. And the way I've done it is I use both hands. So I'm sure the ones of you who stitch in two hands, you will know sort of how that works. I might be able to show you just. So the way I stitch is, I think this is the opposite of what you normally do with stitching in two hands. I think usually you put your dominant hand underneath and you keep your other hand above the fabric. I do the opposite. I don't know why, it just feels right. So that's the way I do it. So what I do is I put my one hand underneath, I put this one above, and then I make the stitch with one hand here, and then my other hand catches the thread underneath, goes into the next one, yeah, and so on and so forth. So that stitching with two hands has really taken the strain off my wrist, has made me feel so much better, allowed me to go on cross stitching without damaging my wrist. So that is the reason I use a stand and not stitch in hand or not stitch on a hoop or something else, yeah. Then I used to have a Lowry stand, you know, the metal ones that clip your frame or your Q-snap or something on one side, and you can stitch with two hands on those as well. However, I found that it was shaking too much when I was using it, and that shaking was really distracting and was taking away from the enjoyment of making the stitches. So the latest and probably the most long-term change I've made, like I said, is I got the frame that stands on my desk, that doesn't move much when you make the stitches, so there is no vibration, it doesn't sort of shake at all. And then yeah, and like I said, if I need to, I will take it downstairs to the living room and I'll stitch with it on my sofa. So that's really great as well because it's more versatile. For anyone interested in buying these, this particular model is made by a Ukrainian brand. I bought it on Etsy a few years ago. It was about £40 with like a 30 by 40 little frame. However, I don't think you can buy that specific brand anymore. If you are based in UK, and I'm not sure if you can buy them in US, Lucas, spelled Luca-S, now make similar type wooden stands. So you can buy them on Amazon, and I've seen them selling them on Etsy as well, if you're interested. Then to the scroll frames. So I've shown you one which is by LBC, and I'll tell you why I've stopped using them. So the mechanism you've seen where the tightening of the rod will keep the stretch on has proven to be not up to the standard, and it doesn't work for me personally on all of the fabrics. So in this particular case, because I'm using quite coarse and stiff linen, well, it's a linen Aida, it holds this stretch quite nicely. I'm not annoyed, and then there's enough margin and enough space here to clip the fabric in, and because it's a thicker fabric, the clips hold it in place quite well. So two reasons why I switched from these to my current scroll frame. As you can see, they are the sew-on, not the clip-on frames. So the reason I've switched to that is A, you need less fabric on your edge to put your stitching onto the frame, and B, it allows you to stretch more evenly, because imagine with a clip-on, you yourself have to adjust the edge and decide which particular place to clip it on to create even stretching throughout the whole, throughout the whole width of the fabric. With this, because you already have the let me show you the mechanism here. So this one has fabric already attached with furniture staples, and then when you sew on your fabric, it keeps a much tighter, much nicer stretch. And then, like I said, you need less fabric at the end of it. Let me probably show you one of the edges so you can see a bit better, right? So this particular frame is made by a local crafter. It's not a company that manufactures these, so unfortunately I won't be able to leave you a link because they only make like a couple of here and there, and I think I got them on Facebook or somewhere, or on eBay, like the ready-made ones. So they use a slightly different principle for stretching as well. Let me show you that. So if in the LBC one you use the side pieces to keep the stretch on and to keep the rods from moving, in this case you have the bolt with the, I don't know what these things are called in English, I'm afraid, with the other things to tighten the rod, and that keeps it in place really, really well and keeps the stretch on, like I said. So the way you attach fabric to this frame is you could quite easily, let me just undo it and show you. So you could quite easily sew it on by hand, I imagine. I don't think there would be any problems. It's more to do with how you want to do it and how it works best for you. So the way I do it is I take the horizontal planks off the frame, again, just because it's easier for me to do it like that. You don't have to do it if you're going to sew it by hand, I think. You can use any sort of threads, again, whatever works for you. What I prefer to do, because it's quicker and I feel like I get a more even stretch and a more even line, right, sewing it on, is I use my sewing machine. So I just go with quite a wide stitch all over the width of the fabric that I'm going to be using. I obviously try to sort of center it in the middle of the frame, and I'll talk about the size and all of that as well in a second. And I just sew it on with one stitch, and then attach these horizontal planks to the side ones, and that's about it. And then I attach them to my stand. So this way, as you can see, you don't have to have a lot of fabric to attach it. So you only have a sort of 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then you can go and stitch literally almost all the way here if you needed to, because you have this additional piece of fabric holding it, you know, away from your rods and allows you to stitch this way. Right, I think that's all about attaching. So what else did I need to talk to you about? How to set up? Yeah, so once it's on and you have your sort of loose fabric, I just obviously scroll it, tighten it as much as I need to, and then I go to the side and I tighten these metal bits so the rod stops moving in place. Same on the other side, and there we go, ready for stitching. Perfect. Right, how to attach, where to buy. I'm sure you can buy these. So LBC also make a sew-on option for their frames, as far as I know, and so do the manufacturers of these similar stands. So Luca S, who sell the stands, also sell frames that are clip-on. You might find that clip-on is enough for you and it gives you enough of a stretch and it's easy enough to use with all types of fabrics. I have found them, for me, this is the easiest way, and it gives me the nicest, evenest, most even stretch. and also allows me to use different types of fabric, because when I used to try and put linen in the clip-on frame, it used to slip and the edge wouldn't be even and the stretch wouldn't be even, which was really annoying. And I do like my fabric stretched quite tight. This is probably even not enough at the moment. So that just allows me to see the holes better in the fabric, make more even stitches. I do not stitch in hand, like I said. I do not stitch, well, I'll talk about hoops in a second. I also promised to talk about the size. So the way I stitch is I get quite close to the edge sometimes, like you see the fabric here. So I find that if I just had a frame that finishes sort of here, that wouldn't be enough space for me to go with my other hand underneath. And so what I found is I want quite a bit of distance between the end of my fabric and the edge of the frame. This is probably too much. I would normally go around this, but obviously the size of the frame is restricted, so you try to find the best frame for the project that you have. I also think I left a bit too little fabric on the sides with this mirabilia, but that's another story. So that's that. And lastly, about the scroll frames, I had a question, why do I like them better than Q-snaps and any other sort of type of stitching in hoops or something else. So I will... Right. So the obvious reason is probably that it's more convenient, it's more comfortable for me to stitch this way. I'm a very sort of visual and aesthetic person in terms of my stitches. So I need everything to look nice. I need my needle minders, I need a nice fabric, I need nice, all of that, yeah? So I want to see no marks on the fabric. So as you could see, I do not grid my stitching. I do not grid any of the counts, Aida or linen. I haven't done any 40, but I can't imagine I would do that there either. And also, the reason I do it, it allows you to make minimum damage to the fabric itself, right? Because when you go into a hoop, when you go into a Q-snap, anything that is small enough that you have to move it a few times before you finish the design, you are left with marks, right? And best case scenario, they just iron out and they wash out. In worst case scenarios, you get a hole, or sometimes, and I'll show you. So I bought the Nerd square hoops, and this is what I was left with when I was done using one. I can adjust that with just a needle and get the fabric back to its normal state, but that's just something to be aware of. So any type of plastic or, you know, wooden hoops as well might leave marks besides like the colored marks. And I used to use a few wooden hoops back in the day, and they would literally leave like yellowish round mark around my stitching. This can also happen with the Nerd ones. The round metal ones and the rectangular plastic ones. So just something to keep in mind. Also, so in cases of, say, hand-dyed fabrics or hand-dyed threads, again, you want to disturb your fabric as little as possible so you don't have to wash it to be able to iron it when it's done. I feel like the scroll frames allow that. Another added bonus and a great example in this case is you can do beading as you go if you wanted to. So in this case, I've added a piece of felt in between the layers of fabric here to be able to stretch the next one, and it allows me to bead as I go. I think... Oh yes, and obviously, again, for me, because I don't use just one hand for stitching, except for the little tiny mill hills and some sort of little ornament on perforated paper and stuff. Yeah. If you have a hoop, or you have a Q-snap, or you have a rectangular nudge, or whatever else smaller thing you're using, you have to have a very specific type of stand that holds that for you in place if you want to stitch with both hands. I find that it's easier for me this way to stitch with two hands, because the scroll frames fit perfectly on my wooden desk/sofa stand. So I think that's it to do with scroll frames and my stand. Hope it makes sense. Again, like I said, if you still have any questions, please comment below. Right, I'll take you a bit closer to the stitching now, and I'll show you my bead organizer for someone who was asking about it in the comments, I believe. So when I'm stitching, and this is not ideal, and you can obviously do it however you like to do it. Let me just take this off for a second. So what I use while beading a design, and that can be a smaller or larger mill hill, it could be a mirabilia like in this case, it could be anything where you need beads, right? Is I use these wooden organizers with acrylic tops. So first thing you can see, and I was asked about this, you can see magnets installed in both the acrylic top and the wood underneath. So the way you work with this is you just lift the top and it literally just fully comes off. And you have it on your desk or your lap or wherever you stitch and bead from. You fill these up with the colors that you need. You can add small stickers with the numbers if you need to, because mirabilia in this case doesn't use too many different types of beads, and they are quite distinctly different from one another. I don't even put the numbers in here. And then worst case, I'll just take the bottle out of storage, the one with the cork top, compare and make sure that's the right type of beads I'm using. But you could totally add stickers in here. You can add them sort of in between the compartments, so you can put it at the bottom of one of them and then put beads on top, whichever way you prefer. This does mean that when I'm beading, say, mirabilia, I have to hold this in one hand and bead with the other hand, which is not ideal. And I have seen sort of little silicone, they look like little cupcake shapes, cupcake molds, but even smaller than that, and they just sort of attach like a magnet to your fabric. If you know what I'm talking about, leave me a comment below. If you know the name of it or where to get it from, I would be really grateful if you could share, because I would like to try one out, but I've seen it in someone's video, but I haven't been able to find it ever since. So this is the bead organizer. The company that makes them is a Ukrainian brand which sells on Etsy. They're called the Magic Wonderland or something along the lines. They have this swan as their sort of trade sign on all of their organizers. They have a lot of different options. So like I said, just search for bead organizer on Etsy, and they have them in different colors and different shapes, different number of compartments. The compartments are of different shapes and sizes. There are multi-story ones with different types of organization. It wasn't very cheap in my opinion, because I know how much they cost back in Ukraine. So I mean, it does take obviously time and effort to bring them and sell them in UK. They weren't very cheap. If you're here, I think I paid about £20 for this one with I don't remember if that included or didn't include shipping, but around £20 for one. But then if you're not doing, sort of too many designs all at the same time, one is probably enough to use for a few, or just one at least. And then, I mean, I think the cost makes sense and works out quite well because you use it for a very long time. So you do need to be quite gentle with the top. I think if you drop it and it hits the acrylic, that might break. I haven't done that, unfortunately, yet. Touch wood. And I do have cats, so I need to watch out for that. But I generally store it away where they can't get it. And so, this is my bead organizer. So the app I use for cross stitching, as I've mentioned already, is Cross Stitch Saga. You can buy it on the App Store, both for Android and Apple, as far as I know, iOS, yeah. And it uses a very specific format of files. So again, I had a question about this. So it doesn't read PDFs, I'm afraid. The format that it reads is XSD or .saga, SAGA, that's the format of the program itself. So this is sort of how the home screen looks like. You have your own pattern that you have saved in your profile. You link it to a Dropbox and an email address, so you can add patterns from your computer to your Dropbox and here. And like I said, it uses XSD file. Let me show you on the same design, so example of the Japanese garden, what a pattern looks like, just so you have an idea. So when you open it, it has a lot of different features which are all very handy. I don't use all of them probably, but I use quite a few. So first and foremost, it gives you the preview of the whole design. And then it comes with the fabric that's on the electronic pattern that was made in Pattern Maker, whichever program the maker of this file put. And then if you want to, you can change the fabric to whichever color you need, so it's easier to read some of the colors. It also tracks all of your progress, obviously. Let me show you that. Tracks all of your progress, how many stitches you've done which day, how many days you're on, percentage-wise, how many stitches of which type you've done. So there's a lot of cool information you get here that is great for some of the users. Obviously not everyone wants to use this. It gives you the stats on the number of the length of the threads that you need for the design. Especially it's handy if you're kitting something up and it's not a kit. It gives you options to check the size on different types of fabric as well. It gives you the grid size, the size in centimeters when it's done. So there's, like I said, a lot of information. And obviously the best feature is when you enlarge the pattern, you can enlarge as large as this, which is great. You can use it on your phone or your tablet. I prefer using it on my phone. And then when you select the color and switch the tumbler on, it only highlights that color, tells you the number of stitches, all of that. I haven't used any other electronic apps for stitching. I will be honest with you. I know there's also a few others. I don't know if they work in a similar way. Again, I'm just showing you what I'm using at the moment. And then when you use when you've done the stitch, you just unlock your marker and you color it off. Or you can do the other way around, where you have the white pattern, and if you mark it off, it becomes in color, whichever way, again, you prefer to stitch. Let me mark it back. And if you made a mistake and you want to mark it back, here we go. And it counts all of that. So that's all great. You can stitch in a specific area that gives you the count of the stitches or the number of stitches of a particular color in the area. This is what I use for my 12 Days of Christmas to just highlight the portion that I'm using. So there's lots of different things. There's also help with parking and gridding and all sorts of things that I don't personally use. But yeah, here's how it works. Just a little overview, and then I prefer to have my patterns in the order of descending percentage-wise, just because it looks nicer to me. So whatever is at the beginning is closer to the finish, and then I have a couple of sort of planned starts here as well. So that is Cross Stitch Saga. Okay, this is not the best way to film a screen, but for some reason my screen recorder program is refusing to work with me. So unfortunately we'll have to do it this I had a question as well, how to get sort of an electronic version of your pattern if I get PDFs of my kits or something. So one of the ways, and here I have a paper pattern of the Japanese garden design that I am currently stitching. And there are two ways of doing an electronic pattern. I'm using a program called Pattern Maker, and you can either scan and get PDFs of your pattern and then upload it as a background into this program and mark your stitches on top of those, or you can just hand draw the whole thing from scratch. So you add your color palette here, every single color, you assign them the symbols, number of strands, all of that, and you can just going like this. You choose the type of stitch, so say I'm using cross stitch in purple, and you just go and you mark down whatever you need to mark down or erase it. And this file exports as an XSD that can be used by Cross Stitch Saga, so you can do it by hand like this, or like I said, scan and then draw on top, so you have the stitches from the scan as the background. That does take quite some time, but it's in my view it's really handy, and it helps me stitch especially the big designs. And because I like the statistics and I like the number of stitches and counting and all of that, I prefer to do this rather than just have a paper pattern, especially for the more complicated ones. It's easier to do it this way than having to try to find every single little piece of a particular color on a big pattern. All right, that is all for today. I hope I answered the questions I was asked in the comments and on Instagram. I hope it's a bit more clear now the way I stitch and why I like the scroll frames more, and what is the way I get my electronic patterns. Like I said, if you have any more questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I'll see you very soon, just in a week, for the March stitching update. Bye!